Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June National Pilot Webinar, and we will get started with this month's call. This is a reminder to everybody that these meetings are recorded. This is an open discussion, so feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question for any of the speakers, and these webinars are posted on the NBSTRN YouTube channel. So our agenda for today is we're going to have updates from all the different pilot sites. We will get started with, let me check and see if New York is on the call. I believe Joe or Saint. Yep, I see Joe. He's able to give us an update on the New York pilot sites.
Hello, can you hear me okay, Jennifer?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So, yeah, since the last call or our last update, we have had some interesting news, I think. We had our first MPS 1 case, and that's now, I believe, in a million babies. And it was what was really interesting about it is about 3 weeks later, we had our second MPS 1 case. So 2 cases, and both of them had very low enzyme activity, and our reference enzymes were very normal looking. So we were actually right from the start thought these looked different. And then mutation analysis showed variants that have been associated with MPS 1 reported cases. And both of those babies have been confirmed with MPS 1, the severe form, were recommended to go to for transplant. So that's probably our biggest news. There's no new or clinically significant Pompe cases since we last talked. Some possible later onset cases. And then ALD, we had 2, we would consider confirmed cases since we last talked. And then you were looking for an update on Screen Plus, where I think the best part about that, or the most, I guess, relevant news, is that it's pretty much at full operation. I think there's 1 hospital left to come on board. And so the numbers are quite a bit higher. We're running somewhere around 500 samples a week at this point. And we have what looks like our lowest enzyme activity Fabry case that we're confirming. We think that will likely be a true case, but we won't be able to refer it for a little bit yet. We're going to do some other tier testing, but enzyme activity was very low at 4%. Other enzymes really normal. We did have a late onset Gaucher case that we picked up. And that's all we've got so far on that. I think that's my update. I didn't get an update on Gamptus, but I have not heard of any, or I know there's no new cases that we've had for referrals since the last talk.
Thanks, Joe. I don't know if you have any updates on MP or CMV as well. I know that the last, I think in March, the update from March, Michelle said that you're projected to start in July. Is that still the case?
They've been working on that. I'm outside of that work group, but I think so. I mean, I'm still forging ahead with that. We still are working on MPS 2 as well, but we have no firm start date for that. But we're working on setting up the chromatography method so that we can multiplex with the other enzymes, which don't require chromatography, but the MPS 2, at least from the approach we're taking, requires LC mass spec instead of flow injection. But we're looking at something that would be next fiscal year for that, which would be sometime after May or June of next year.
Okay.
Hey Joe, this is Amy, and thanks for the update on Scream Plus. I think we've heard Dr. Wasserstein and the team talk about Scream Plus a few times over the last several months as part of genomics meetings. Can you
Yep.
tell us a little bit about how you guys are using genomics in Scream Plus?
Well, every screen positive that we have, we're doing sequencing of the associated gene. And if there's a biochemical test that's associated with it, like a second tier biochemical test, such as, glucosyl sphingosine with Gaucher or GB3 sping with Fabry. There's various markers that we can get done through Mayo. So we're trying to correlate enzyme activity, marker concentrations, and the molecular findings to largely at this point just to verify how the screening's working and where our cutoffs are, as well as if there are molecular findings of significance, then we'll be correlating more with any clinical findings later on. So it's the combination of them is being used to refine the screening. But we've done actually some work where we didn't pick up we don't know where to set some of these cutoffs, because I think probably most of you known or maybe heard, it's hard to find a screen positive baby, a specimen that you can use, or enough specimens to actually set your cutoffs. So we set cutoffs that are quite conservative or elevated compared to what we think they ought to be. And in some cases, we even went higher than those, and we're running the biochemical and the molecular just to make sure we're not picking up anything that would make us be concern us with missing any real positives. And so far, all of that has showing our cutoffs are conservative, and we're not, we wouldn't be missing anything. So that's one way, or the primary thing we're using them for now. I think as we go further, it's going to depend on how many positives we find that are of clinical significance, or where we see second tier biochemical that's abnormal, and then trying to correlate that information.
Do you know, Joe, if you guys are doing 500 per week, how many are getting sequencing, and are you running into a lot of variants of unknown significance or a lot of novel variants?
We're not picking up many at this point, just because it's not a very high sample load relative to what we would ordinarily, usually we're doing 10 times more specimens a week. So I mean, it's still significant. I mean, it's 10% is a pretty decent amount, but we at 500, but it's not enough that, with all these diseases, we're not finding much. And the one thing we're doing the most sequencing for at this point in time, which is going to change, is for MLD. We're not finding, that's a little bit different, because it's supposed to be a second tier assay that's an ARSA enzyme assay rather than a molecular assay. But because we don't have that set up, and it's not set up anywhere where it can be clinically used at this point, we ended up doing more ARSA gene testing, and we only have found so far one variant there. But that marker, the marker associated with that, the C16 sulfatide marker, is elevated for more than just enzyme deficiency, as indicated by the high false positive rate of that test. It's like a 0.5 to 1%. So you really do need ARSA assay. So that's something that if you're doing this in a real live environment with high sample volumes, you'd want to have an ARSA assay up and going.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I wanted to also confirm with you, because I was typing and I might have missed it. So you have 2 cases for MPS 1, which is the big update, and that's approximately after 1 million babies screened. Was that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. So it's still a little bit higher than I think some of the other reported. The incidence it seems like it's a little bit more rare in New York than other cases, but 2 cases back to back in a million.
Yeah, it was strange how that happened. it was similar timing to when our two ALD cases came up. They come in streaks around here. I don't know if that's true everywhere, but
Joe, I don't know why you're saying this because I say over and over again that babies don't do, like all other children don't do things on their own. They always do things in groups.
yeah, it makes you start to believe that the phase of the moon thing might actually have some truth to it.
I work labor and delivery. That is truth.
Do we have any other questions for the New York team?
Yeah, Joe, for the two, is there any thought to go backwards and just sanity check the process to see if there's anything that you can identify as differences that might be sort of assignable cause for why there was so little before and now? I mean, clearly the stats could just work out this way, right? But is there now that we have a before and after scenario, is there an effort, a task force there to kind of just dig into it?
There's not really a good reason to, because the screen positive rate is quite high. I think, let me tell you, even though we've only detected 2 true positives, we have the genetic testing done on, I think, 40 or 50, way above what would be the incidence rate.
So your first tier seems to be working correctly.
Yeah, because we have tested 130 of the million babies with molecular testing, and 82 of those were only non-disease causing variants, the so-called pseudo deficiency variants.
Right.
We're picking up. And there's some clear, when you look what I mentioned earlier about those, they have activity that's low, below our cutoff, but they're usually in the 3, 4 to 6% kind of range. Our cutoff 6%, which is low relative to the other enzymes we're looking at. But the ones that were the 2 cases where there were true positives were below 2.5%. So they were like, and that's where samples that we had tested from other states that had provided us with samples, and even other states that have reported on their results, they seem to be well below 3%. So it's like, everything sort of lines up that we're not missing any. And the other thing is we've polled our physicians to ask if we've missed any. And it comes up at meetings with MPS experts, and they're always, some are really dumbfounded by the low numbers, but then Joe Munzer, Dr. Munzer from North Carolina at Duke, he says he hardly ever hears of any New York cases and hasn't, and he thinks it has to do with our population being fairly the melting pot nature of New York's population.
Yeah, and it could be the stats, right? When we're talking about frequencies this low, even 1 million as a sample size, like it's starting to become a real sample size, but it's certainly you'd have more confidence that you've hit your true average after a few million,
Right.
and we could do the power analysis on that to actually see where that knee point is.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
And you said you got confirmatory gags for these as well. Did you get that back in the lag? I'm guessing those were those extremely high?
Yes.
And that's dry blood spot gags or
Urine
urine.
gags, yeah.
And do you do blood spot gags?
We don't, and we should. So, I'm not saying, we just have not implemented that. And the molecular testing for IDUA is more expensive, but we're really good at it here. And it doesn't require us to go anywhere and set up contracts. So we, what I was telling you before with 100, it's still not great. I think gags would be better, but with 100 screen positive enzymes and 80 of them being considered false positives by molecular, it's not as bad as it sounds, but that's still 18 more than were real cases, kind of a thing. So we are looking to get GAG implemented. It's just something that takes time.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are doing excellent with the first and second tier, the first enzyme and second tier molecular. it would be interesting to see what your false positive rate. I mean, we haven't really discussed this in a while, but I mean, are you sending more samples? Are you following up with more people than you want to? Like, do you have a lot of VUSs that you're following up on for MPS 1? Or you guys kind of feel confident about sifting those out?
There's the VUS problem with MPS 1 is reduced compared with Pompeii and Crab A. So the vast majority of false positives we see are, like 80 of the 100 ended up being the pseudodeficiency, known polymorphic non-disease causing variants. And the thing with this, I think it's with the low cutoff, and MPS 1's a little bit more robust as far as there's less of an age dependence or birth weight dependence on the enzyme activity. You end up, it's one of the better ones that way, even though, so you could set, I think people could set lower cutoffs with this. Coming from the person who's only detected 2, maybe people will be nervous, but I think if they look at their numbers and see where the true positives are coming, if anybody's finding anything higher and would want to share those kind of specimens with us, it'd be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, Amy, did you want to ask your question? I see your hands raised.
Yeah, Joe, just since we have you here, so I know you said you're not on the CMV team, but if you guys could remind us if you're using the same approach as Minnesota, if you know, or different. And then second question is maybe next time, since you're reporting a little bit on Screen Plus, if you guys could report on Guardian, since you're doing that testing too. I just couldn't remember if you guys were going to include that in your report, or if there was anything to report.
Yeah, just to remind me about the Guardian thing, because that would be coming from Denise.
Yeah, I think we asked Michelle on that, Joe, and I think we're going to coordinate with Wendy and Michelle or something.
Yeah, that sounds good.
For the next.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much moving along, and there are some samples getting molecular now for that. As far as the CMV test, I don't know if it's the same as what's going on. I'm sorry, Amy. I thought it was I'm pretty sure it's a PCR based test, and that's about all I can remember.
No problem.
Yeah, and being it's sort of molecular, it stays, we divide and conquer here with so many projects going on.
And then I see that Ryan has a comment in the chat. He's asking about the first tier flag rate for other states compared to New York. And Kate, since you also have your hand up, I was wondering if you had any, or I can open it up to anybody else on the call, other states. I know everybody's using different approaches. I mean, I know there's a first tier enzyme, and then second tier, some states are doing second tier and some are not. So I'll open it up to see if anybody wants to comment on Ryan's question.
Well, I can comment in a large way on like MPS 1. I have that number handy, not necessarily for most of the other disorders, but in Georgia, for the year 2022. So assume a birth rate in Georgia of about 130,000 a year, roughly. We had 78 samples go for second tier testing, and we have no diagnosed cases. There were 4 from that flagged positive in 2022. 4 kids flagged positive. But we're all either pseudodeficiencies or we had 1 parent refuse follow-up.
So you said it in about
130,000 kids. That's roughly our birth rate.
Yeah. And I'm not sure I don't know if you know, Angela, or if your lab person is on, like what percentage the enzyme cutoff is or something. Do you know what your cutoff is?
We use the CLIR tools to determine that.
Okay. So your method is a little bit different than New York, because are you guys using the CLIR tools, Joe, for New York? remind
Yes,
us? I know you said
yeah,
it.
we do use the clear tools, but with MPS one, I think it's set up, to be honest with you, it's set up for a lab that actually has more second tier gag testing on hand. So our cutoffs actually eliminate a fair number of positives that clear doesn't. So I feel bad saying that, but that's, you know, the way it seems to
Your
work.
experiences is what your experience is.
Yeah, it's what our experience is. And, you know, I mean, some people, you know, might say, well, no wonder New York's screen positive rates kind of lower, or they're not detecting, they must be missing cases. Yep, that's what people like to think. But so far, it's not been proven to be the case by any of our sources. But you know, it's been 1 million babies is only 4 years for New York State, so it's not like it's been an eternity.
And
We-
Clear
we-
learns. Clear learns. If you feed your information in, it will learn.
Yeah,
And because it's kind of a AI like thing.
yeah. It does help that way. We're using without having any real cases, though. It's hard to teach it, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now you're getting some. So
Yeah.
And then Amy, just to follow up on your question, your first question about CMV, Norma did put a comment in the chat that New York is using the Neo MDX kit, which I'm assuming from Revi. So, the new, I guess that's the new name for PerkinElmer. Everybody's gonna have to learn their new name now. So that's the kit that they're using. Kate, I know you have a question up, your hand up. Did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I have a different question than I had when I raised my hand. But
Go for it. Go for
Great
both.
conversation. Yeah, it was for Joe. So what are your second tier plans for Screen Plus? Are you doing gags, or are you doing sequencing, or how does it work? And do you have you seen any pseudo deficiencies, or do you expect to?
With the Screen Plus, we actually had built into it to have contracted out all biochemical testing done. So it's set up for gags for all the MPSs we're screening for with that test, and molecular, because like, you know, one of the things about doing gag analysis is you don't really get to equate like low enzyme activity with what's the cause of that. And you know what we've seen through all of our second tier screening with Sanger sequencing is that there's almost always an explanation for the real low activity for these samples, babies. And sometimes you see repeated VUS, and you start to be able to correlate those with, you know, and we do this a lot with Crab-A because we have a lot of experience, but it makes it a lot easier for us to start to get a better idea of what these variants mean in the population. So we're trying to use that in our process with Screen Plus to help inform people down the road with what variants might be detected.
And then you were talking about implementing gags for MPS 1 screening as well. So what's your thought on, you know, how are you going to use gags and sequencing? Is one going to be a second tier and one third? Or are you doing both? Or
if we were doing gags, we would with MPS 1, we would just use gags alone, probably not do the sequencing. But I don't know that. We haven't gotten to that far. We might still do both, but we're not seeing recurring kind of variants with MPS 1, like I mentioned earlier, that, you know, are showing up where we don't know how to explain them. Most of the time, what we see is somebody with most of our referrals have been a pseudo deficiency on one allele and a known pathogenic variant on the other allele. So I don't know.
So they turn out.
We're not finding out a lot of VUSs where we're going, oh, we don't know what this means, and it causes a lot of trouble. You know, with MPS 1, really, our sequencing, it looks like it carries and everything, and then goes on for gag analysis and urine and follow-up diagnosis, and they're cleared. So
right. Thanks.
Following up that question, Ms. Nicole Miller did have a question about the Guardian. And I'm not sure if you are prepared to address this. You might, is MPS 7 also in Screen Plus?
Yes.
So she was following up on Guardian, but maybe you can, if you can talk about Guardian, or you can, I guess you can follow up on MPS or Screen Plus about MPS 7. Nicole, if you want to unmute yourself, feel free to. You're asking about the false positive spot.
Yeah, sure. And hi, Joe. Yeah, I just remembered the presentation at ACMG about the false positive for MPS 7. And I think that Wendy was saying that she was going to do some work, I think, with you guys to look at GAG for that from that spot. And I was just curious if that is something that's in the works.
I don't know if it is. It's been done kind of through that stream. We have Denise generally would be following up on that.
Okay.
I don't think she's on this call. I don't see her, but so I don't know if any additional work would have been done.
Okay.
Not
Thanks.
that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then lastly, I know Jeremy, he was commenting about I guess he was giving a comment about the statistics of finding cases of when you're screening 1 million. And Jeremy, if you want to unmute yourself and comment, I'm guessing you're saying that the probability is not that high to find 2 or fewer cases. Is that what you're trying to state here?
Yeah, it is quite low if you look at the statistical analysis of it. But if the issue is if the population estimate is correct, right? That's the big issue. If there is actually 1 per 100,000, then it's quite unlikely to have found only 2 in 1 million samples. But so it suggests that it sounds like you're pretty confident that you're not missing cases. So it sounds like for New York, the population rate could be much lower than 1 per 100,000. But it seems pretty unlikely if that was the case.
Well, this has been a great discussion. Do we have any other questions before I move on? I'm going to go ahead and move on to North Carolina for the update on DMD and MPS 2.
Yeah, hi, this is Kate Kucera from RTI. So for, let's see, DMD, we've screened over, 16,470 babies as of the end of May, so yesterday. We've had 95 screen positive cases just from the initial CKMM test, 79 of them consented to NGS, and we're doing a large neuromuscular panel. And the results from those tests, we have 2 with DMD and 1 with CLCN1. That's all should be there. And neither of the 2 qualified for gene therapy. And let's see, we had 69 that consented to blood draw. So we do latent CK testing at 1 month of age or later. And that's turned out to be pretty difficult. The specimen collection is not always successful. That's why we're having kind of not too many of them, and they have to go to LabCorp to get that test done. And that's about it. Yeah, so, let's see. So we had other 9 with a positive finding on the neuromuscular panel, and those were all heterozygous carriers. And then MPS 2, we've screened 99,321 babies as of yesterday. Our cutoff is 10% of daily median And so we are picking up some pseudodeficiencies. We've had 1 true positive and 16 pseudodeficiencies. We are outsourcing GAGs for second tier to Brevity. And the positive one was the only one that was positive on GAGs by the Fuller method. And then we do sequencing as well, and then confirmatory urine and blood. And so for all the pseudodeficiencies, the blood enzyme was deficient or low, but the GAGs were the confirmatory urine GAGs were all negative. So it's very much as expected.
And we have a question from Melissa Parisi in the chat about the 2 confirmed DMD that were not eligible for gene therapy treatments.
Yeah. So both were given information about steroid trials. One, they decided to pursue it and they qualified, but then they decided not to do that.
I'm guessing you guys are anticipating publishing your MPS II results in a publication. It'd be interesting to see if is there any other pseudodeficiencies that you're finding? Like, are you finding new ones that haven't been reported before?
We had some questionable ones. Most of the ones we've seen have been reported. There was, I recall, one that was questionable in the literature, whether it was a VUS or an actual deficiency, but I think that's the only one that I recall that was questionable. Others were mostly published, but we are getting all of the variants, so we're getting the VUSs and the benign, all of them basically, and so we are able to look at some combinations as well. And we're seeing some differences in enzyme activity levels and in some of the GAGs as well.
And you guys are going to what's your N number for the MPS II? How many are you guys screening?
So we currently we are slated to stop in July, but we're having some conversations about whether we can extend. And the rate is about 10,000 a month. So we're expecting to be around what month is it? 110, 120. If we're able to extend, of course, there'll be more.
And I did have another question, but I forgot it as soon as I asked that question. Anybody else have any questions for Kate? I can't remember what my question is.
That's all right. I'm staying, so you can ask later if it comes to you.
Yeah, I'll probably pop in my head as soon as we move to the next topic. Yeah. I will let us know if you have any other questions. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the Georgia group because I can't remember my question. Too many things you're doing at once, you tend to forget. I know Angela's on, and Angela provided us an update ahead of time. So Angela, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and just go through and let me know if you have any additional information to add.
Thanks. And Bill's here also, so
Oh,
Bill,
yeah.
feel free to chime in if you've got anything to add on here. But this is what I sent off ahead of time. Crabase, we had a state-funded 3-year pilot for Crabase, so we're kind of in the middle of that, and it continues to go quite well. So Crabase started with our regular edition Pompeii and MPS 1 back in September of 2021. And since that time, and just so everybody knows, we're doing enzyme, and then if it's low, second tier for cycosine that Mayo is performing for us. And so far, we've just had one positive screen on one affected kid. Still, that was back in last year sometime. So, and no missing cases that we know of. So that's great. So it's going well. Our expanded homocystinuria pilot has finally started. So small party for that. And just so everybody knows, that one's kind of complicated and it's hard to explain, but it's looking at both elevated methionine as well as we established a low methionine cutoff. So we're looking at both ends of methionine results, as well as everything that screens positive for the C3 over C2 situation on nasal carnitines. So any of those that flag, we are sending second tier testing also to Mayo for to look at homocystinuria. Homocysteine, MMA, and MCA on dried blood spot. So 24 cases so far have been referred for second tier testing. We've got no true positives from those results, which is not surprising. And but what has been really great, not only that our numbers are not too high, so that's wonderful, but also that we've ruled out some kiddos not needing confirmatory testing based on those second tier test results. So that's pretty exciting. Our game plan is to reevaluate everything at the 6-month mark and make some decisions about how to move forward. So I should have some good numbers for that around or shortly after the 6-month mark. So I'll be sure to update everybody on that. But so far so good. It's a good start.
And
Hey, Angela, the
ahead.
dry blood spots you send to Mayo, are they just a punch from your original dry blood spot?
We send them a whole spot actually from the original card.
Okay, we had heard like people are running out of real estate a little bit or running out of dry blood spot.
Yes,
Just wondered
yes.
how that
That's
plays
going to be a
role.
concern.
Yes, that's, if we add anything else, that will eliminate the ability to do second tier testing. So yeah, it's becoming a problem and we're beginning to discuss it at the state level about how to, what to do. I mean, there's really only one alternative if we're going to keep doing things the way we're doing it, is to add on another spot or two, which with all of the headaches and training that's going to involve.
Yeah, and then Rashimi is asking a question about your cutoffs. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you want to remind us, because your protocol I know is a little bit different for this, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm trying to frantically pull up the number so I can tell you guys. Okay, so for elevated methionine, it's based on your birth weight. So for our kids below 2,500 grams, methionine lower than 150, and I don't have my units on here, but below than 150 is considered normal. And for our bigger kids who are greater than or equal to 2,500 grams, it's less than 70 is normal. Now, let me tell you, remethylation disorder. So for the low methionine, it is.
We use MET-Phe too. So we got
yes, we do. We do also look at MET-Phe. You're exactly right. And then methionine low cutoff is normal if it's greater than or equal to 6.31.
Which is our lower limit of quantification. So we don't go lower than that.
And you guys are, if you guys are having out of range results, you guys are still using clear before you do the second tier, is that correct?
No, not yet.
No, but we are running it and we are gathering that data so that we can look at it. That's going to be part of our 6-month.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to try and use clear to improve things once we've got the data from the first 6 months. And we're, the kids that are very low birth weight, they're getting repeat screens later. We're not running second tier tests on these kids that are popping up positive on a screen when they're like 600 grammers or something. We're not doing that, because otherwise we'd be doing second tier testing all the time.
There's a few questions in the chat.
Yeah.
about Bloods, like how many spots you're collecting on your card, and how many punches are you using for your normal testing?
Okay, so we collect 5 spots. So we're talking about adding, like full blood spots. We're talking about adding a 6th. Joe, sorry, I don't know how many punches they actually use in the lab. That is unfortunately not something I'm aware of. But so far it has not been a problem to send a whole spot over to Mayo. Of course, we do that for MPS 1 and for Krabbe as well. So Mayo has let us know that if they had to do, let's say we were asking for second tier testing for like cycosine as well as this pilot, then they said they could just do it all on one spot. Do I think screen positive results represent other disorders or still working on cutoffs? I don't, so that's a loaded question, Melissa. So methionine is always hard because we have, this is Georgia, we have a lot of premature kiddos. So even, or sick kiddos. So even if they're not technically premature, so we're using for 2,500 grams more or less, and 2,000 for the low methionine. Yeah, just to kind of try to weed those out. That doesn't mean our kiddos aren't in the NICU. We have a lot of problems. So, they might be on a pre-made formula or something that's a methionine enriched formula. So that's a hard one to kind of tease out, and we don't always get great information on that. The C3 kiddos, the kiddos who have elevated C3 or C3 over C2, those kids, wow. I feel like a lot of those kids are reflecting B12 deficiency. Even before this pilot, I've been doing a lot of just give that kid some B12 and everything normalizes. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. It really the person who loves maternal child health in me is wondering if moms really aren't taking their prenatal vitamins. I also think it's really interesting that I see elevated MMA in those kids, even if the B12 is normal, but if it's less than 400. Anecdotally, I'll tell you, everybody less than 400, their MMAs hike up. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, met to Phe ratio in Georgia. So met to Phe doesn't totally factor into second tier testing. It's more about kind of how we respond to that result. But I'll just so you know what our cutoffs are for those little babies on the met to Phe is anything less than 3.4 is normal, and for the bigger babies, anything less than 1 is normal on that ratio. Georgia's policy on retaining dry blood spots is 12 weeks unless we know you have a diagnosis from the screen, and then they keep it longer, but 12 weeks is our policy. I hope I've answered everybody's questions.
Yeah, I think you did a great job. Good job. This is wonderful.
Yeah, so that's where we're at on that.
Yeah, that's this great information. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Bill. I'm going to follow up with Kate's question to Joe about how New York manages the availability of samples. So I'm guessing, Kate, you want to unmute yourself? I'm guessing you're asking with all the different programs you guys are testing for, do you have issues with specimens, running out of specimens? Is that correct, Kate?
Right. I've already gotten some answers from Joe, so
okay.
maybe you can answer.
Yeah, I don't mind repeating that, because I was wondering a lot of what other people are doing where they're running out of specimens, because we get 5 circles in a normal baby. We're testing 1 full circle and partial of a second circle. So Screen Plus requires 3 punches. So, as long as we got 5 good punches to begin with, we're not going to have any trouble. And of course, all this assumes everything else is normal. So, if we start with ground zero being everything's normal, we have 3+ spots to work from for both the Guardian project and the Screen Plus project. Screen Plus is done after everything, and so is Guardian. So if we end up where we can't because there's limited blood for some reason, it's been more retest or whatever, then of course those take a second or a back seat. And, they would not get done, or we'd have to ask for repeats if there was reasons to do that. So that's how we're handling it here.
Are you having issues with like premature or those small babies? Do you have specimen issues with those, or
Not
like are you testing
generally.
those more?
Yeah, they definitely get retested more at a higher frequency. There's more reasons that things will be off in one area or another, but nobody's coming to. It's rare that we've, at least from the Screen Plus point of view, where we've not been able to go and get 3 punches. So I don't know about the Guardian because I don't oversee that directly or know much, but I'm not hearing about. We're always running out of specimens.
Yeah, sequencing takes many punches, usually 6 or 4 to 8 or something like that. I don't know what the Guardian is using, but I was also thinking about CCMB, right? So some of those assays, and again, I don't know if you know how many they're using, but the Minnesota CDC assay used 3 punches for the initial test. So.
And maybe, I think Norma's on, she can reply to that, but.
Joe, can you remind us how long New York retains dry blood spots?
Right now we currently have blood since 1999. So we have a 27-year length, which we're looking at changes off the record, on the record, whatever you want to say. But so we have lots of dry blood spots, but after a certain amount of time, they're really not useful for routine screening. Whatever that is, one of the things, once you get past 5 years, even 3 years, you start making sure that everything, you're not having an age of the specimen related issue when you're trying to do any method development or, population-based screening analysis. We usually use fresher stuff for that.
So and Norma put in the chat 2. Are you saying 2 punches, Norma, or 2 entire DBS spots?
I think 3 millimeter, 2 3 millimeter punches.
2 3 millimeter punches. Okay, so not an entire spot.
And then retest, right? I mean, yeah. So the reason I'm asking is that we do have some QNS for our Duchenne testing. So we prioritize MPS 2 before Duchenne, and we also run into specimen availability issues.
Any other questions for Angela or the Georgia team? I know for the HCUs, for the homocystinurias and related disorders, how many specimens are you guys planning to screen?
I believe it's around 300,000 specimens. We're doing the project for about 2 years.
Okay, sounds good. And this is just like data analysis. This is not an extra. You're not doing any extra testing. It's just data analysis, right?
Well, the second tier testing is extra.
Okay, yes. Thank you for the correction.
Yeah,
we're really trying to improve things. We're trying to pick up cases we haven't picked up before and get rid of false positives without having to call people in.
Thanks again for the update. I don't see Dr. Parad on the call today. I will just check and make sure that that's correct.
Angela and Bill, does what you're doing with homocystinuria, does it tie into CDC's efforts and what they're testing out?
What's that?
Thanks for saying that first.
Yeah, I was like, what?
Huh?
What are they doing?
So I'm gonna say no, but I would love to.
Yeah, there's
Just
other
across
people that
town, and we don't know about this.
Yeah, I think they're looking into a new approach to homocystinuria and, controls and QA and, just wondered. I don't know the details. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but maybe somebody else on the call knows. But we can follow up with additional information.
That would
That'd
be
be
swell.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Before we go into the announcements, I was wondering if there's any other states planning on having any that has any updates that they're planning. I was wondering if anybody knew about if they're adding MPS 2 to their screening panel soon.
Bill, help me here. I don't remember what we decided about that in
It'll be
Georgia.
next year. It'll be next year. They got to finish the construction and then the equipment, all that sort of stuff. It's before, I think that the budget got approved. So I
Yeah.
think it's a go for next year.
Great, good. Because you guys approved that, right, on the committee?
The committee did, yeah. It just had to go through the legislature. I just don't know what the final
Right, the
budget came out
budgeting
of.
piece.
Yeah.
And
Looking
then,
good for Georgia on MPS 2.
great. And then I see that Joan added about MPS 1 for Illinois. They first confirmed case for the 100,000 babies. So look out for the next one because apparently babies do things in pairs. But great update. And then Carol said Iowa MPS 2 were voted on in April. So I guess people are entering a lot. Probably will be adding in 2024 next year. California will be adding MPS 2 and GAMT in 2024, which is great. This is all great information for us. So thank you. Thank you all for the updates. South Carolina screening for Krabbe, and so screening, you just started screening for Krabbe this year, Tanya, and then you're looking to add MPS 2.
Yes.
Good for you. Anything, any excitement, any updates on that? The MPS, the Krabbe screening? Or it's boring is usually good when you first start.
We had a little bit of excitement. We did find during validation one case we believe is a later onset, but not any infantile at this time.
Okay. And Amy, I know you're putting a couple articles in the chat. I didn't know if you wanted to mention something on them. I guess this is the follow-up for the CDC
Yeah.
effort. Okay, so if everybody follow up on those articles, and then I'm gonna just since we're getting close to the end, I wanted to make sure we have enough time for announcements. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we do have some speakers for the upcoming months. Next month, we'll be hearing from Colin Hill, and I should change the title. They're no longer PerkinElmer, but he'll be discussing the MPS 2 assay. And then in August, we will be planning on, we'll be hearing from two speakers, Dr. Ingra Home and Dr. Holly P.A. will be updating on their sequencing efforts, BabySeq 2, as well as the genomic update for early check. And then I know Dr. Chung is not available, but I think she did discuss, or we're going to connect her with Michelle to see if she can give an update on the Guardian in our September call. And I think Dr. Chen is on, Jack on our team, if she's on, can give the announcement about our bioethics and legal survey. Or if Dr. Brower, you want to give that update too, either. So our bioethics and legal work group, they invite you to participate in their survey, the Researchers Needs Survey. It's a 7-minute survey. If you guys have phones, there's a QR. If you scan this, you can get the QR code and get access to the survey. It's only 7 minutes long. And we would I think they'll be sending out a link in the newsletter letter as well. We can also follow up and send something out on the listserv for people to fill out too. And oh, this is an old slide set. Dr. Chen, did you want to make your announcement about the podcast?
Yeah, I'll just do a quick screen share. I have my
Sure.
slide deck on. If that's okay. So folks can see. Hello,
Sure.
everyone. So first of all, I want to say that we had a very successful network meeting. We had over 560 people who registered. We're just excited that it just gets better with everyone participation and suggestions for topics. And so however, if you missed the network meeting, you can watch the replay on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you to watch them. If you attended, want to rewatch, they're all available here. So this is just a screenshot of our YouTube channel. You just type in MBS Trend. It should take you to this page. And we created a playlist of this year's network meeting. And we also have the playlist of all our previous network meeting and research summit. So you can also check that out as well. And also happy to share that we have our latest new episode on the Newborn Screening Spotlight podcast. We have our speaker, Brittany Holmes. This is in celebration of the month of May, which is PKU Awareness Month. And we're excited that she shared her personal and professional journey as an adult living with PKU and who pursued a career as a nurse practitioner to care for patients with PKU and other metabolic disorders. So definitely listen to her story, how she even starts her whole podcast that if it wasn't for newborn screening, I wouldn't be here. So it's just so inspiring to hear her story and how dedicated she is to newborn screening research, and which is basically all the work that this whole team, this community is working on. So definitely take a listen. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining our meeting, and we look forward to seeing you next month for our July meeting. We'll be sending out where we'll have a Colin Hill speak about the new MPS II assay. So hope you guys have enjoyed your holiday weekend, and we will see you next month. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.